Marriott is the largest hospitality business in the world, and despite the fact that they own an impressive portfolio of other brands, they managed to preserve that core DNA, and this is thanks to their emphasis on values throughout the recruitment process. So in this video I'm going to touch on the more interesting aspects of the recruitment process, from hiring for cultural fit, their core values, and give some hopefully interesting insight into what Marriott is looking for when hiring new people. Despite Marriott no longer being a founder-led business, you'll be surprised how many times CEO Arne Sorenson talks about their core values and leadership in general. And next I'm going to present you these four core values, and I want you to pay particular attention to the keywords presenting throughout this presentation, as they might be particularly useful when building both your CV but throughout your communication during the hiring process. Marriott's end goal is to deliver good experiences to its customers, and this has been the same from its beginnings. This is essentially how they compete against other major hospitality providers. So take care of our associates, and they will take care of our customers. So I guess the main takeaway from this first core value, and also by far the most important of the four, is that Marriott values a lot more than others people skills. Excellence at Marriott refers to their ability to please their customers regardless of demographics, and the way they achieve this is through mergers and acquisition. That is, you acquire somebody that already achieved that capability. And why I'm saying it is because the alternative to this method would be to do some trial and error, and all this would be on the back of the customer. So the highlight of this second core value is in the process of achieving this excellence. So now what's in for you as a candidate here? Well, I wouldn't go as too much into the business side of things, but rather I would emphasize on going above and beyond to satisfy whatever customer needs there are. Embracing change refers to Marriott's continuous interest into the latest trends, and CEO Arne Sorenson admits that the most innovation nowadays happens in the technological sphere. So if we go back to my earlier example of mergers and acquisitions, despite the fact that Airbnb is within the hospitality space and is a technology business at its core, they're not trying to copy it, but rather to see whether if it's going to be a fit for them as a business logic, which isn't in this case. So maybe another example would be my other video with Arne Sorenson talking about Marriott's four core values being actually one of the most viewed on my leadership series. So what's in for you as a candidate here? Well, I guess the main takeaway would be to be open-minded, to always show open-mindedness to new things and to new opportunities. Acting with integrity might sound like an old-fashioned value, but CEO Arne Sorenson goes a bit further to explain what do they mean by this in a contemporary setting, and it basically means that leadership has evolved in time, and people like to feel valued because of their ideas, and the model of the celebrity CEO is no longer applies today. So people also like to feel empowered to even disagree. So the lesson as a candidate from this one is that there can be great leaders of very different personalities. So during the interview, you should make sure that you are your true self, and just focus on integrity and show integrity. Spring to serve is, as the name implies, the ability to not only do things well, but do it as a good pace, as a good speed. So the way that Marriott does strategy within an international context here is to empower their partners to take ownership of their processes, and this is essentially what allows them to create even better experiences. Now, with respect to applying for a job at Marriott, the main takeaway here should be obviously the ownership, the sense of ownership, that I believe should be a keyword that should most likely be present in many CVs, and maybe even something to emphasize during the interviewing process. Now, why would you have to spend time to tune up your resume, and why is this first step so important? Well, it's quite simple, because this is a step in which the most resumes get filtered out of the process. So now, what are some of the best tips to have a great resume? Well, at least in the beginning you should start with your strengths, and no matter what you write, but be sure to keep it always on a positive note. Then understand that you'll be tested for cultural fit throughout the interviewing process, and what best place to start than with your resume. So it's not by accident that I present the 4 core values in the beginning of the video. So you should make sure that you take some keywords, some main takeaways from there, and make sure that your resume resonates with that type of thinking. For example, you could start with integrity and ownership as 2 keyword examples. Now, a lesser known fact about resume screening is that there are some studies that reveal that recruiters spend in average no more than 6 seconds to screen a resume. So how can we take advantage from this? Well, we could make an exercise here. What if you read your resume in 6 seconds? So would you hire yourself based on the first 6 seconds of reading your resume? I'm sure you could spot some things that can improve there. For instance, like placing your most relevant experience on top. And finally, be sure to check your resume for typos. I'm saying this because it wouldn't be a pity if you spend all this time to build a great resume and then to just have a few typos here and there that would basically ruin the morale of the one screening it, because in case you don't know, recruiters are particularly sensitive to these things. Now, before going into details, it's very important that you understand that Marriott is all about selling great experiences, and in fact I was surprised myself to see that they are one of the best ranked companies on Glassdoor with respect to applicant experiences. So also Marriott hires a lot using campus recruitment programs such as the International Voyage program. So in such a scenario, there will be that initial point of contact during the event, followed by a one-on-one interview. And by the way, you can also apply online in such a scenario. The process might vary according to your location, but as a general idea, they will ask you to fill in a personality assessment, also a cognitive assessment, and maybe also invite you to a recorded video interview. Now, if you passed this first step, they might ask you to go to the on-site interview that will be basically run as a 2-on-1 interview, into which they will inevitably test your people skills, your cognitive abilities, you as a cultural fit, and where the STAR method to answer behavioral questions will be very important. So the on-site interview is basically where you would have to bring in your A game, and for the Voyage international program, the process might take from 3 weeks to 2 months according to online resources. Now, for pretty much any role, the interviewing process is quite standard, in the sense that there's there's an application, there's some online tests, and followed by an on-site. So the only common thing, denominator to all of this is the behavioral part of the interview, into which they put a lot of emphasis on these STAR questions, which I will explain next. Now, when it comes to the STAR interviewing method, there is a ton of information on the internet, and there are a ton of technical aspects about this process, and even people giving precise examples of behaviors that you should use here. However, I won't be focusing on any of this, simply because I believe the most important part of this whole thing is to practice them. So before going into the inevitable so-called technical part of these things, let me re-emphasize that Marriott is all about creating exceptional experiences, and this is, for an applicant, this simply means to have exceptional communication skills, and for the given role, of course. And the one word that should summarize this would be to be really good at storytelling. Now, assessing someone's storytelling capabilities and their overall communication skills is not an easy quest, and this is why they prefer to do this at the on-site interview. So I've heard people saying that the hiring team at Marriott asked them to prepare a success story for the on-site interview, and this is where I would like to start my explanation of how to prepare on these behavioral questions. So I would start by saying that for example, take that success story or the main highlight of your career, then spend as much time, up even 1 hour, even more than 1 hour, to write down everything about it, but really everything about it, and then start summarizing into the following format. Start by mentioning the situation that you're describing there, so describe the situation as briefly as possible, but keep the narrative format. Then describe the tasks that you had to perform for that situation. And by the way, you could use the same narrative format as for the first, and you could even link the first two sections together if it makes more sense in your case. Then the third step here would be to mention the actions that you had to take during that for the described situations and for the tasks you earlier referenced. And finally, mention the result that was the consequence of those tasks and that actions that you had to take. So why such a format? Well, it's, to be fair with you, it's because it's a very it's one of those things that recruiters love to have a structured framework for somebody to explain something, because it touches all the major points that they want to highlight. So okay, so once you've done presenting your success story, the highlight of your career, using the STAR format, using those 4 paragraphs, in my opinion, you should go ahead and prepare another 3 or 4 stories to have a total of up to 5 stories. And the reason why I'm saying this is important, because during the behavioral part of the interview, there will be multiple questions you will be asked to answer. And when you're asked a behavioral question, if you choose to apply the STAR method to answer it, then you should spend the most brain cycles on properly structuring your presentation, not to spend most of your time trying to remember what was the specific scenario from that story that you're trying to remember about. So this is why preparing for this behavioral interviewing part is very important, to prepare those stories, those specific stories. And even furthermore, I will give you some examples of the most used behavioral questions that are being asked at Marriott, but also in other places. And you can, for example, also go ahead and try to answer them and basically try to link one of your stories with one of these questions. So again, just to summarize here, so the first step would be to work on your stories, try to write as much as possible about them, then summarize them using the STAR method, using the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And then finally try to give at least one answer to, let's say, the 20 most common behavioral questions. All right, so now that I explained the hardest part of this thing, now let me also tell you that you should also probably prepare a few questions for them. And one method that I know here is used to brainstorm to find your best questions that you would like to ask them is the method of 4 C's, in which basically I give you 4 areas with some example questions that you may choose to ask Marriott during your interview. So as you can see here, Marriott is quite serious about their culture and their values throughout the interviewing process. So I believe the main highlight from all this would be that you should really practice your storytelling, because after all, we're talking about the hospitality industry. Thank you for watching.